On a freezing winter night, the cold seeped through every gap in his clothes, wrapping around every corner of Saigon. The dim yellow streetlights cast flickering shadows on the old, moss-covered walls, creating an eerie sense of solitude. Hoàng, a 40-year-old construction worker, trudged wearily along the street. The biting wind whipped against his rough, calloused hands. He pulled his tattered coat tighter around his exhausted body, worn out from a long day of hauling heavy materials. As he approached the familiar narrow alley leading to his shabby rented room, his steps slowed. Amidst the silence of the night, a faint sound drifted by. At first, Hoàng assumed it was just a stray cat lurking around the trash heaps at the alley's entrance. But something was different. The sound was broken, fragmented, almost like a cry for help. He stopped in his tracks, straining his ears. There it was again. A fragile, wavering sound, as if trying to tear through the stillness of the night. A deep instinct stirred within him. Hoàng quickened his pace, his eyes scanning the dimly lit shadows. Then, just ahead, near a pile of scattered trash, he spotted something in the weak light, a small wooden box. Covered in the dust of time, the small wooden box lay silently, as if it had been forgotten for ages. A strange premonition rose within Hoàng, making his hands tremble as he slowly lifted the lid. His heart nearly stopped. Inside was a frail, emaciated newborn. The baby's half-closed eyes barely fluttered, its breath as fragile as a thread. Next to the infant lay a small piece of paper, its writing messy yet filled with desperate pleading. "Please save this child." Huang's gaze locked onto the tiny figure curled up in a thin, fragile cloth. A chilling sensation crept from his fingertips, coursing through his entire body. Questions surged through his mind. Who abandoned this child? Why, on this freezing winter night, had such a fragile life been left behind? Then, like a lightning bolt slicing through the darkness, Hoàng realized, at this moment, he could not turn away. He bent down, his rough, calloused hands carefully lifting the infant from the cold wooden box. The child's tiny body was icy, weak, like a candle flickering in a harsh wind, barely holding on. Without hesitation, Hoàng removed his worn-out coat and wrapped it tightly around the baby, as if willing every last bit of his warmth to shield the fragile life in his arms. The cold wind howled through the alley, cutting through the night like icy blades, but Hoàng paid no attention. His eyes were locked onto the infant's delicate face, scrunched up in distress, struggling to let out weak cries, fragile, desperate pleas for help. Without a second thought, Hoàng bolted out of the alley, his legs moving so fast that he forgot his exhaustion from the long workday. As he ran, he looked down at the tiny child in his arms, his heart weighed down by relentless questions. Who abandoned this baby? How could they be so heartless? And why, on a freezing winter night like this? But more than anger, an overwhelming sorrow surged within him. In this moment, Hoàng knew only one thing: he had to do whatever it took to save this child. Turning away was not an option. At the hospital, he rushed forward, placing the baby into the hands of the doctors. His eyes never left the fragile little body as it was gently laid onto the stark white hospital bed. His heart clenched as the doctor spoke. The baby is severely malnourished, in critical condition. If it hadn't been found in time, it might not have survived. Those words struck Hoàng like a dagger to the heart. He stood frozen, helpless, staring through the glass of the emergency room, his chest tightening with anguish and worry. Huang's heart was heavy with worry and regret. If he hadn't walked through that alley, if he hadn't heard that fragile cry, what would have happened to the child? A while later, the doctor came out and informed him that the baby was no longer in critical condition. Hoàng felt a wave of relief wash over him, as if a heavy weight had been lifted off his shoulders. But that relief was short-lived when a nurse approached him and asked, "What is your relationship to the child?" Hoàng froze. He had never once considered that he would have to answer such a question. But as his gaze fell upon the fragile little figure through the glass, something inside him shifted. His eyes burned with a newfound determination. Then, with unwavering resolve, he spoke. "I am the child's father." Those words were not spoken on impulse, but rather, they were the result of an undeniable force that had taken root deep in his heart. From the moment he lifted that child into his arms, Hoàng knew. He had chosen a path from which there was no turning back. A father is not always defined by blood, but by love and an unshakable commitment. When news of Huang's decision spread, his friends and colleagues were quick to voice their concerns. "Have you really thought this through? You're just a poor laborer. How will you support a child when you can barely get by yourself? Do you even know how difficult it is to raise a child? And you're single. Do you even realize how hard it is to raise a child?" Those words struck Hoàng like heavy blows to the chest. But he remained unfazed. Every time he looked into the child's clear, innocent eyes, he saw something. A glimmer of light, a spark of hope that had long been absent from his life. This boy was a new beginning, the light he had been waiting for during his darkest days. Hoàng made his decision. He named the child Min, meaning new light. Then, in a quiet but resolute voice, he whispered to himself, "No matter how hard it gets, I will raise this child." He knew the road ahead would be full of challenges. But with Min in his arms, Hoàng felt that every hardship was worth it, because in his heart, the flame of love had been ignited, and it would never fade. From the day he adopted Min, Hoàng threw himself into work like an unstoppable machine. By day, he toiled under the scorching sun and pouring rain at the construction site, his bare shoulders bearing the weight of heavy cement sacks. By night, when the world had fallen into slumber, he took on extra jobs from neighbors. Fixing electrical appliances, hauling goods, cleaning up. That tiny, cramped rented room, which had once been nothing more than a place to rest after a long day, had now become something else. It had become a home. A place that truly mattered in his life. That tiny, cramped room had now become a home. In one corner, Hoàng had tidied up and placed an old crib for Min. The space was small, but it was filled with love and hope. In the early days, every time Hoàng watched Min sleep peacefully in his crib, his tiny rosy cheeks rising and falling with each breath, all of Hoang's exhaustion seemed to melt away. But the weight of financial pressure never eased. Every penny he earned barely covered formula, diapers, and a few cheap toys. One day, as he passed by a children's store and looked at his empty wallet, he could only whisper a silent promise to his son. "Just a little longer. I will take care of it." But life had never been kind to the poor. After endless days of grueling labor, Hoang's body began to break down. His once calloused hands ached constantly, and sudden bouts of dizziness and fatigue overtook him without warning. And then, the inevitable happened. On a scorching summer afternoon, under the relentless heat, Hoàng was straining to lift a massive steel sheet when his vision suddenly went dark. The shouts of his co-workers, the pounding of running footsteps, all of it faded into a distant blur as he collapsed onto the burning hot ground. When he regained consciousness, he found himself lying on a foldable cot in the construction site's infirmary. The low ceiling, the dim fluorescent light, it all seemed hazy as he blinked, trying to make sense of his surroundings. Hoang's breath was heavy, his chest weighed down by an invisible force. But the pain that hurt him the most was the image of Min flashing through his mind. Those big, round eyes, glistening with tears as he looked at him through the crib every night. His heart clenched. If he lost his strength, if he collapsed, what would happen to Min? That child had already been abandoned once. Could he let Min go through that pain again? That night, Hoàng sat silently by Min's crib. The pale moonlight filtered through the small window, casting a soft glow on the boy's innocent face. Min's tiny fingers twitched, reaching out to grasp Hoang's calloused hand. In that moment, Hoàng felt something profound. A reminder that he was the only pillar of support this child had. Min smiled in his sleep, a small, delicate smile, but enough to illuminate Hoang's weary soul. "I will never let you go without a Min." His voice was low, steady, almost like a sacred vow. Even if it cost him his health or his entire life, he would do everything for his son. From that day forward, Hoàng changed his way of living. He learned to take care of himself, to eat better, because only by staying strong could he continue to protect Min. Hoàng began to live more mindfully, resting when necessary. Though he still worked tirelessly day and night, he now made time for Min, holding him close, rocking him to sleep, telling him little stories about the future he dreamed of for his son. Every time Min smiled softly, his tiny hands reaching up to touch Hoang's face, a surge of strength washed over him, dissolving all exhaustion. To Hoàng, Min was not just a child in need of care, he was the light, the very reason that kept him moving forward on this arduous journey. No matter how many hardships lay ahead, he knew that as long as Min was by his side, every sacrifice was worth it. One Sunday morning, as the early sunlight filtered through the window, casting a warm glow over the small rented room, Hoàng sat down to sort through some old belongings, a rare moment of peace in his otherwise hectic life. In the corner of an old cabinet, his eyes landed on a familiar wooden box. The very same box he had found Min in on that fateful night. Hoàng picked it up, holding it in his hands for a long moment. Memories from the past came rushing back, awakening emotions buried deep within him. A stream of memories flowed backward. Hoàng recalled the faint cries, the tiny frail figure curled up in the cold, and the moment he first opened this box. His calloused hands brushed over its rough wooden surface, eyes carefully scanning every detail. Suddenly, he noticed something strange. On the underside of the box, there was a small inscription, faded by time but still legible. T. Ba Hoa, No. 5, Co 2 Street. His heart clenched. The inscription felt like a missing puzzle piece suddenly appearing in Min's unclear past. Who was Ba Hoa? How was she connected to the child? And why was this address engraved on the box? Hoang sat still, thoughts racing. Curiosity and doubt urged him to uncover the truth. The next morning, after careful preparation, Hoang carried Min, now a lively, bright-eyed little boy, to the address carved on the box. The alley leading to Kotu Street was narrow and aged. It felt as if time had stood still here. Street stalls lay quietly under the shade of old trees, and the occasional distant calls of vendors painted a scene of eerie stillness. Hoang stopped in front of an elderly woman sitting at the street corner, a few modest items arranged before her. On an old bamboo tray, a few simple goods were displayed for sale. People called her Ba Hoa. She was a frail woman, her skin darkened by time, etched with deep wrinkles. But in her eyes, there was still a gentle warmth. As Hoang approached, Ba Hoa looked up, her gaze landed on Min. In an instant, her expression froze. She fell silent. Her frail hands trembled, and tears welled up in her eyes. Her voice broke as she whispered, "This child." She took a deep breath, then finally said, "He is my grandson." The words shattered the silence, leaving Hoang utterly stunned. He stood motionless, unable to believe what he had just heard. Sensing Hoang's confusion, Ba Hoa slowly began to speak, her voice heavy with sorrow, soft as the wind rustling through the leaves. Min's parents, her son and daughter-in-law, had perished in a tragic accident over a year ago. Min was the sole survivor. But trapped in poverty, unable to raise her grandson, Ba Hoa had no choice but to place Min inside the wooden box, hoping that a kind soul would find him and give him a better life. Every day, I ask myself, did I make the wrong choice? She spoke, tears quietly falling. Her frail hands, but when I see the child healthy and well cared for like this, I know I did not make a mistake trusting the kindness of a stranger. Hoang looked at Ba Hoa, his heart full of mixed emotions. He felt compassion for her situation, but also a sense of responsibility for Min. Now, his feelings toward Min were no longer just love, but a deep connection to the child's biological family. I don't blame her, Hoang said, his voice low but firm. I will continue raising Min. As long as the child is happy, I'm willing to do anything. From that day, Ba Hoa began to visit Min often, bringing small gifts. Sometimes it was a few homemade cakes, other times it was a set of clothes she had carefully sewn. Even though Min was still small, he could feel the special affection from his elderly grandmother. Hoang realized that Ba Hoa's presence not only gave Min a link to his past, but also provided a source of spiritual strength for him. Looking at Min's bright eyes as he played with Ba Hoa, Hoang knew that seeking out Ba Hoa was not just out of curiosity, but a way to give the child a more complete family, even though, in any circumstance, and from that day on, the story of Min and the old wooden box was no longer just a painful memory, but a reminder of love, sacrifice, and intense hope. What seemed like small things could change an entire life. The revealed secret pulled Hoang into a whirlwind of mixed emotions. Ba Hoa's words, the tears in her eyes as she spoke about Min, her only grandchild, left a deep impression on his heart. He knew that Ba Hoa loved Min and felt her pain in having to part with the child, but he could not imagine a day where he would have to give up the boy he had come to see as his own son, the only source of life and light during the dark and tiring days. One afternoon, while Min played with his small toy car, Ba Hoa sat opposite Hoang in the cramped rental room. She looked at Min, her eyes filled with sadness but full of affection. "Hoang," she whispered in a low broken voice. "You've taken very good care of Min, but he's my grandchild, my only remaining blood relative. How can I live without being by his side?" Hoang froze, his eyes lowering. Hoang did not blame Ba Hoa, as he understood she was bearing the pain of a grandmother who had lost everything. However, the love he had for Min would not allow him to be apart from the boy. Looking at Min, with his pure eyes and innocent smile, Hoang felt that Min was an irreplaceable part of his life. In the days that followed, Hoba and Ba Hoa often met to talk. Initially, their conversations were slow, cautious, and tense. Ba Hoa shared with Hoang the story of her family, a once happy family filled with the laughter of children, only to be swept into the tragedy of an accident and loss. Meanwhile, Hoang shared the moments he had spent with Min, the sleepless nights holding him when Min was sick, the times Min would sweetly ask for stories, and the moments when the boy first called him father. One evening, Ba Hoa took Hoang's hand. Her frail, shaking hands held his as she quietly said, with a choked voice, "I cannot deny that you are the best father for that boy." She spoke softly, her voice catching. "But I have one wish, one hope in my final days. Please allow me to see my grandson often. I don't want him to grow up without me." Min grew up not knowing that he had a grandmother who always loved him. Hoàng looked at Hoa, his eyes filled with empathy and understanding. "You don't need to worry," he replied confidently. "Min will always know that you are a part of the family, a grandmother who has always watched over and loved him." From that day on, Hoa became an inseparable part of Hoàng and Min's life. Every time she visited, Min would run to her, hugging her tightly and excitedly telling her all kinds of stories. Hoa brought small gifts for the boy, sometimes homemade cakes or a shirt sewn from old fabric, but to Min, those were treasures of priceless value. Despite being busy with work, Hoàng still made time to listen to Hoa share stories from the past. Her invaluable life experiences became a great source of spiritual encouragement for him. "Raising children is not just a responsibility," she had said. "It's about passing on faith and kindness, so they learn to love and cherish life." As time passed, the bond between Hoàng, Hoa, and Min grew stronger. Min grew up surrounded by their love. The boy not only had a devoted father but also a gentle grandmother who always reminded him of his roots and the love of family. On those nights, when Min was peacefully sleeping in his small bed, Hoàng sat with Hoa by the teapot. They talked about Min, about the dreams they had for the boy, and how they could ensure that Min would have a complete, happy life. Hoàng knew that, despite the challenges ahead, with the love and support from Hoa, he no longer had to walk the path of fatherhood alone. Min did not just have a small family in a cramped room, he also had the vast love from two hearts that always placed his happiness above all else. And from that point on, every day for them was a testament to the power of love. That family is not only built by blood but also by sacrifice, compassion, and promises that never fade. Time passed quickly, and the lives of Hoàng and Min gradually stabilized. Hoàng, once a man struggling with life, had now become a devoted father, but he never lonely on this journey. Hoa, with her life experience and heart full of love, was always a solid emotional support. On those nights, when Min had fallen into a peaceful sleep, the small cramped room became quiet. Hoa and Hoàng would often sit together, talking about Min and sharing life lessons. Hoa, with her warm voice, always emphasized that raising a child was not just about providing for their basic needs. The most important thing was teaching them to love, to cherish life, and to understand that family is not just about blood but also about affection and responsibility. Hoàng listened carefully to every word she said, remembering and applying it to the way he raised Min. He learned how to balance work and life, ensuring he earned enough to support them while also having time for the boy. Every day, he strived to give Min a warm childhood, despite the many challenges of life. Min grew up surrounded by the love of both Hoàng and Hoa. The boy, intelligent and energetic, was always curious about the world around him. Min loved exploring everything, from the toy cars his father made for him to the stories Hoa told about the old days. But as he grew older, Min began. At first, Min asked questions that Hoàng knew he would ask one day. "Dad, why don't I have biological parents like the other kids?" Hoàng was silent when he heard that question for the first time. Even though he had prepared himself, the innocent look in Min's eyes still made his heart tighten. He knew that it was time to tell Min the truth. One evening, after a warm meal, Hoàng sat beside Min, holding the old wooden box and placing it on the table, the box he had always kept like a precious treasure. Min looked on curiously, his eyes wide with excitement but also tinged with some suspicion. "Min, this is not just a box," Hoàng began, his voice calm and deep, his eyes full of love. "This is where your journey began, and it is also where I found you on a cold night." Hoàng told the story from the beginning, about the fateful night when he heard the weak cry in the empty alley, about the small form curled up in the box, and about the decision not to turn away. He told of meeting Hoa, the secrets she had revealed, and the unbreakable bond that had formed between him and Min over the years. Min sat quietly, his eyes following every word Hoàng spoke. It was as if Min were visualizing everything in the story. When the story ended, Hoàng placed his hand on Min's shoulder, his gaze gentle but firm. "Do you understand, Min? Family is not just about people who share the same blood. Family is where love resides, where our hearts choose to stay connected. I chose you from the very first moment, and I will always be the one by your side, no matter what happens." Min paused for a moment, then suddenly hugged Hoàng tightly. "I understand now, Dad. I don't need anything more. As long as I have you and Grandma, that's enough." That night, Min sat beside Hoàng and Grandma Hoa, his eyes filled with understanding and happiness. The wooden box, once a reminder of a painful past, now became a symbol of love and a new beginning. From then on, Min no longer asked about his biological parents with sadness or a sense of lack. Instead, he carried the story as an inseparable part of his growth journey. Min learned that the true value of family is not in blood relations, but in love, kindness, and sacrifice. With the unwavering support of Grandma Hoa, Min continued to learn valuable lessons about compassion and how to face life's challenges. Each passing day, Hoàng felt that, despite the challenges of fatherhood, the love he received from Min was the greatest reward, enough to help him overcome any obstacles ahead. The story of Hoàng, Min, and the wooden box is not only a tale of connection but also a testament to the power of love, a force that can overcome any boundaries or tragedies to create a real family. Min turned 20 years old. The small house was filled with laughter and the lively atmosphere of a simple yet warm birthday celebration. Grandma Hoa, now with her hair turned gray, sat smiling gently beside the wooden table. Familiar neighbors stopped by, bringing with them their best wishes for Min. The young man had become a source of pride for the entire neighborhood. Min, wearing a crisp white shirt, stood in the middle of the room, glowing like sunlight. The little boy who once curled up in the cold wooden box was now an outstanding medical student. With noble dreams of healing and bringing hope to others, Hoàng looked at Min, his heart filled with happiness, but also touched with a hint of emotion. The days spent raising Min replayed in his memory like a slow-motion film, with the difficult moments, the tiring times, but most of all, the loving moments that had nurtured them into a real family. As the party neared its end, Min stood up, his eyes glowing with emotion. "Today is not just my birthday," Min said in a mature yet warm voice, "but it's the day I want to thank you, Dad, for giving me a life I never dared to dream of." The entire room fell silent. Min walked over to Hoàng, holding a brand new wooden box, intricately carved. Min placed the box into his father's hands, his eyes sparkling. "Dad, I made this box to replace the old one from years ago. But its meaning hasn't changed. This is how I want to tell you that you will always be the only light in my life." Hoàng hesitated before opening the box. Inside was a letter, each line written neatly with emotion. "With love, Dad." Min knew that life had never been easy for his father, but his father had never given up on him. "Dad, you are the only light in my life. You saved me from the darkness and gave me a family, a new life. Thank you for never turning your back on me, thank you for always loving me and sacrificing for me. I will always love you." Hoàng trembled as he read each word, unable to hold back the tears. They were tears of happiness, relief, and above all, pride, filling his heart. Hoàng tightly grasped the wooden box in his hand, feeling all the love and gratitude that Min had placed within it. "Min, my dear," Hoàng said softly, his voice choking. "I never needed you to thank me. Just seeing you happy and growing up, that is the greatest gift to me." The entire room erupted in applause and well wishes. Ba Hoa quietly wiped away her tears, her gaze resting on Min and Hoàng, two people who had once been strangers but had come together with a love that surpassed all difficulties and boundaries. That night, after everyone had gone home, Hoàng sat quietly in the calm room. The new wooden box rested in his hands. Gently stroking the surface of the wood, Hoàng gaze rested on the letter. In that moment, all the struggles, sleepless nights, sweat, and even tears melted away. All that remained was deep pride and a love that could not be expressed in words. "Thank you, Min. You are the only light in my life," Hoàng whispered softly, then smiled, his eyes still shimmering with tears. The new wooden box now lay beside the old one, like two generations connected, a reminder that love and kindness have the power to overcome everything, to write the most beautiful stories of life. Thank you for listening to our story. Each like, share, and subscription to our channel is not only support but also a valuable source of encouragement that helps us continue bringing emotional and meaningful stories. Every word of support from you is the flame that keeps the faith and love alive in our work. Thank you sincerely, and we look forward to seeing you in our future stories.